The second lesson this week is a review of dividing monomials. We have already worked a lot with dividing exponents and multiplying exponents in class, but I just want to reinforce this skill just to make sure you're really good on it before we move on to anything new. So let's take a look at one of the first IXL examples. I have 8b divided by 4b. So just start with your numbers, your coefficients, 8 divided by 4, which is 2, and then b divided by b is 1, because anything divided by itself would just be 1. So I would just be left with 2. Next problem, 10y divided by 2y squared. Okay, so if I was to expand this out, I would have 10y divided by 2y times y, because y squared is 2y's. So I'm going to divide my coefficients, 10 divided by 2, which would give me 5. And then if I were to cancel off what divides out, y divided by y is 1. So I'm left with 1y in the denominator. So my answer would be 5 over y. Okay, you could have also used the rule where you just subtract your exponents. So let me choose a different color. So if I wanted to come back up here, I would still do 10 divided by 2 to get 5, but then for my y's, I would subtract my exponents. So remember, there's really like a 1 up here. It's an invisible 1. 1 minus 2 would be negative 1. So I would have 5y to the negative 1. And remember, we don't want a negative exponent, so in order to make that negative exponent positive, I would have to move it to the denominator, which is what would result in this final answer that I have boxed in, 5 over 1y. Okay, next one. Okay, this one's getting just a little bit harder. We've got a lot more going on here. So we're starting off with 3QRST divided by Q. Ooh, that was a funky Q. Let me redo that one real quick. Q to the 5th, R to the 5th, S to the 7th, T. Alright, so let's start with the coefficients. I've got 3 divided by 1, which is just 3. Alright, I'm going to use the rule here. I know that I have more Q, R, and S's in the denominator than I do in the numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my fraction line as like 3 over 1, because I can just tell by looking at this that there's more Q, R, and S's in the denominator. So let's go ahead and use this rule that we have been talking about. Whenever you're dividing numbers with the same base, you subtract your exponents. So this is really q to the 1 divided by q to the 5th. So I would take the exponents and subtract them. Okay. Let's move on to the r. So I would have r to the 1 minus 5. Now let's go to the s's. S to the 1 minus 7. And then our t's is just t divided by t. So your t divided by t is just 1, so your t's are completely gone. You don't have a t variable anymore. Alright, let's go ahead and simplify this one out. So I still have 3. Q to the 1 minus 5 would be negative 4. R to the 1 minus 5 would be negative 4. And then S to the 1 minus 7 would be negative 6. Alright, so this is technically correct, but we never want negative exponents. Notice up here says make sure all your answers are using positive exponents. So like what we talked about earlier, I know that there's more Q, R, and S's in the denominator. So in order to make them positive, we're just going to move them to the denominator, which would leave me with 3 divided by q to the 4th, r to the 4th, and s to the 6th. Alright, next example. Okay, next one. I've got 2 divided by 1, which is just 2. Now let's take a look at our variables. Let's start with the s. So s to the negative 1 minus 0. Well, I know negative 1 minus 0 would just be negative 1. Now I'm going to look at the t's. So I have t to the 4 minus negative 4. Okay, minus and negative is really a plus, so this turns into 4 plus 4. So this would become t to the 8th. Okay, one final step. I don't want any negative exponents, so I need to make this s to the negative 1 positive, and I do that by moving it to the denominator. So this would become 2t to the 8th over s to the 1. Alright, last example. Alright, so we have 9 divided by 9, which would just be 1. So now I'm just going to look at the variables. So let's start with the t's. I've got t to the 1 minus t to the negative 4. So this would be t1 minus negative 4, which would turn into t to the 5. And then let's move to the u's. So I have u to the 3rd divided by u to the negative 1. So I would end up subtracting 3 minus negative 1. So this would become u to the 4th. And then I have the v's. V to the negative 2 divided by v. So this would be v to the negative 2 minus 1, which is v to the negative 3. And then finally I have w to the 1 minus negative 8. Which is w to the 9th. So let's go ahead and simplify this. It looks like the only negative exponent we have is v to the negative 3. So I'm going to turn this into a fraction and leave all of my positive exponents in the numerator. T to the 5th, u to the 4th, and w to the 9th. And then v to the negative 3 is going to move to the denominator and become positive. Let me rewrite that so it's a little bit cleaner there. So this would be my final answer. T to the 5th, u to the 4th, w to the 9th, divided by v to the 3rd. Alright, that's it for this IXL. Talk to you later.